Now we're going to shift to a bit of an interview session with the different speakers we've had this morning. So I would ask both Sharan and Donfang to join me here at these two tables, as well as Per Bondevik from the Initiative for Ethical Trade here in Norway. And while they're coming up on stage, I will introduce Per, who's manager of the Ethical Trading Initiative Norway. The Ethical Trading Initiative is a resource center and an advocate for ethical trade practices for Norwegian companies sourcing from abroad. It's also a multi-stakeholder initiative with NGOs, trade unions, business, government, and the Enterprise Federation of Norway, NHO. The Ethical Trading Initiative's aim is to strengthen its members' efforts to promote decent working and environmental conditions in their supply chains and to strengthen support for ethical trade in general. And we're very happy that you were able to join us here for the panel discussion, Per. And I'm going to begin with you by asking you if you could reflect a bit on what you've heard so far, and in particular from a perspective based on your work with businesses, with company supply chains. We've heard about the role of labor. We've heard both Donfang and Sharan talk to us about the role of government in those conflicts with labor. We've heard about the role of dialogue. I wonder if you could start us off by talking a little bit about what you think is the balance, the proper balance between states and companies in responding to precarious work.
It's a big question, of course, but one obvious approach is to base it on what the UN is saying and the OECD and others, and it's very clear on stating that the state is the primary responsible to protect its citizens for all kinds of abuses on human rights. That means having appropriate laws, which from what I've heard today and from what I've learned before as well, is not the key problem, but implementation, enforcement of law. Of course, the governments have a lot of work to do there in ensuring good mechanisms for minimum wage processes, laws that are conducive for organizing labor, implementation of those laws, etc. One interesting thing I thought about when you were introducing the 40 years of history, and also Sharon's comment on the business of CSR, is that I think during the development of the last 40 years, with more and more outsourcing of production to China and others, there has also been an outsourcing of responsibility to a certain extent. Back in the 70s, on the fjords of Western Norway, where I come from, there was garment factories all around. No one were doubting where products were made. They were actually proud of making them. There's been some years now recently with campaigners challenging the garment industry to open their supply chains. Been some reluctance, but some improvements as well. But the whole issue is about not being that proud any longer of the production conditions, labor conditions where things are produced. And I think the UN Guiding Principles, the new Sustainable Development Goals pointing to decent work and inclusive growth, are actually stating that you cannot organize yourself away from being responsible for how your products are made, which is an important step. Placing responsibility on governments, then definitely also on companies. Sometimes when working on issues like wages, etc., we get the question, well, you know, we are open for, I'm happy to pay more if I make sure that the workers get the money, and who should pay for this increase? Who should pay for Chinese workers not being so afraid any longer for demanding higher wages? Will production be moved to Vietnam, to Ethiopia, to Cambodia? Maybe. But I think that's putting the question the wrong way. I think we should rather ask who should definitely not be paying the price they are currently paying, as Han Dong-Fan showed. Someone is actually paying for our products being cheap. At the same time, our consumer is providing jobs. That's good. But we need to make sure that there are decent jobs. And companies should actually ask, who is actually paying the price? Are we paying the real price? Or as I sometimes like to say, as an economist of trading at least, are we really internalizing all the real costs related to this production? That's, I think, is the key challenge where governments and business unions need to work together.
To shift a bit beyond the role of excuse me, of the government as a lawmaker and enforcing the rule of law. Government has other roles as well as an investor and as an owner. And I'm just wondering, you know, in particular, for example, public procurement is a huge part of the market here in Norway and in other countries. I'm just wondering, Sharon, from your work, if you've encountered positive examples of ways that government can structure things like procurement and investment to encourage responsible business in their global supply chains.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are government policies that themselves are based on due diligence. They're not as deep as we would like, but certainly I know from my own country that's been a big battle for many years, and finally there are rules. There are rules in the EU about these questions, but it is in fact the question of whether they're implemented as the rule of law or whether they remain at policy level, and whether in fact the monitoring and the consequence of not actually following those. Because I can tell you that in the state of Qatar, for example, the US military has strict laws around procuring work, supplies, goods from trafficked labour, yet they have a base in Qatar. I can tell you that I'm sure that if your Norwegian government actually looked at its own procurement rules, it wouldn't really condone the investment decision that your pension funds have just taken to invest in Saudi Arabia, in a slave state, let alone the side of the conflicts that they are promoting in the Middle East. So we need to do much more on this question. And can I say that you can't divorce the public services question of education and child labour. I was struck by the arguments from your colleague. You know, the Education International, the teachers' union, we are working with them to try to undo some of the damage of for-profit schools, where you now have supply chains, vertical and horizontal, companies like Pearson's, some of the biggest companies in the world. Pearson's just sold the Financial Times. I think it has like now a stock of some $3 billion to invest in education. That means privatising public education. And in Ghana, there is for-profit schools where the world would be shocked to know that if your parents can't pay, if you're in danger of being expelled, you wear an orange band. If your parents haven't paid and you're on the verge of that, you wear a red band. And what happens is those children go to work because their parents can't pay in the morning or the evenings to pay their school fees. So there's a lot wrong with the way in which we have outsourced responsibility. I think that's exactly the right phrase.
A little bit back to the issue of collective bargaining, social dialogue that was mentioned by all of you in different ways. One of the problems that you mentioned, Donfang, was the problem that businesses just aren't interested. They're not used to collective bargaining. They're not predisposed to using it as a way to manage conflict in the workplace. Are there ways that we can join up the kinds of ethical trade initiatives being driven from consumer countries with the work of trade unionists on the ground?
I think first we have to separate whose responsibility is what and how far you can go. And consumers' campaign is a moral self-regulated, and that you buy this, you don't buy this. And other than that, you can't go beyond that. And ethical trading organizations and corporate social responsibility also play a very important role to keep this moral standard, and also even self-policing for the companies. At least you announce that you believe that you should treat the workers well and pay better. That's it. And beyond that, at least the last 20 more years I have been dealing with and talking with corporate social responsibility organizations, including the companies. I haven't seen any concrete progress beyond talking. Again, union. The workers' rights is about share the cake. And the workers want to bigger, reasonable, you got to organize it. yourself, and you got to bargain. If a union, even in this country, if you're not able to bargain, doesn't matter you are under democracy or what, you don't get as much as you're supposed to. And even if in China, under dictatorship regime, if we bargain, we gain more than what the employer willing to give it to us. So again, the global supply chain, how to deal with this, how to correct it, how to stop this running to the bottom thing is to have collective bargaining everywhere. That is why I'm very kind of an impatient person, and we collective bargaining in China just began the past, a few years, and it's not even systematic. We're already planning to, I'm planning to go to Cambodia, go to Bangladesh, to talk to the workers over there, to share our experience in implementing collective bargaining even without a democratic regime and without freedom association. So what we want to do is whoever the brand and supply chain, you can go anywhere and you have to deal with the workers standing up, say, hey, let's bargain. That's the solution.
And you know the reality, like the question about who pays, a few cents, $1 at most, on most items of clothing would pay a minimum living wage for workers all across the textile supply chains. So I think saying to consumers you're responsible is wrong. We don't say that to consumers when there's a car with a faulty brake system. The company has to recall it. Or when pharmaceutical products are in fact dangerous, the companies have to recall them, often not quick enough. Same with food. Why is it that right across the supply chains, when in fact responsibility is denied and we see abuses, is there not the same rule of law that says you can't fund your product?
I want to let Per come in on this. From your experience, can you see progress in making that connection between responsible consumer campaigns and collective bargaining on the ground?
I think at best an indirect link. I think consumer campaigns have the role to play, but in my experience, the most important influence they have is waking up some companies and knocking on the doors and getting attention from CEOs or communication directors in big brands saying that, oh, so there's something happening out there, we need to deal with that. So it can generate some interest internally in companies and make other than the CSR responsible to take some interest in the issue, which I think is very important. Just commenting on what Donfang said about our role, although I like my job, ideally I would be out of work in some years where there are collective bargaining agreements everywhere, so we do agree on that issue, definitely. But I mean, there are progress. We have the Accord in Bangladesh in the lines, which is one important step forward, driven by campaigners and unions, and getting basically all the global brand sourcing from Bangladesh to engage in improving health and safety conditions at the factory. Important step. There was recently, a couple of days ago, announced an agreement between Industrial and a group of major clothing brands will work together on wage issues in the sector. And of course, we collective bargaining as one of the key mechanisms, or maybe the key mechanism there. Brands also have a job to do looking at their purchasing practices. I mean, as some of the examples from China reflected, are the pricing actually giving the employer the possibility to pay a decent wage? Are order settings actually giving the employer a possibility to not ask for extreme overtime? That's part of the job brands need to do. I want to just spend 2 minutes on a recent example from public purchasing in Norway. The health authority in the eastern parts, Helse Sør-Øst, had to place a big order on gloves, ended up in a factory in Malaysia. They thought Malaysia gloves could be a risk of migrant workers, labor conditions. They had an assessment made, and the short version is that after some efforts, also including a German supplier, Vietnamese migrant workers got their passports back. They got the contract written in a language they did understand. and they got reimbursed the recruitment fee they had to pay back in Vietnam in order to get the job. This is a part of international global supply chains, also from a public purchasing point of view. So there are, one example did not change the world, but it did quite a lot for those workers. And I think with the new EU directive coming up, there's a similar process in Norway. Law, I would assume that in 1 year, the regulations on public procurement in Norway and the EU wouldn't look too bad. But there's quite a job to do on implementing it, involving brands, unions, local NGOs, suppliers, to see how we can break the chain of migrant workers without contracts, etc.
There is also the issue of the contract price that, in fact, Pierre raised, because we have a unity ticket with some of the small to medium enterprises. We must have. You know, Donfang showed you what happens when the contractor doesn't get paid. But when you have a manufacturer who just recently said to me in the Philippines, Sharon, I get 90 cents for each pair of jeans. I can't pay the rent, look after the supply, pay the wages you want me to pay. And we're talking, you know, tiny wages in a month with 90 cents on a pair of jeans. So that's right. And it is about how on earth the brands can be forced to take responsibility for paying the real cost of the production and paying it in a timely way. And, you know, we get really angry because we're not anti-business. We're joined at the hips. But I can tell you when the supply, we work in a, not just on the ETI where we have one of my directors sitting on the board with the British TUC, but we work in a project with the IMF and the World Bank called Better Work, which works with companies. But we actually assisted to get a loan facility for Gap when they couldn't get their products to the, because of the global financial crisis and their cash flow had diminished, they couldn't get their products from the docks in the US. But you know, is that repaid? A Gap part of the accord? No. They won't join. The American companies will not join the accord. Why? Because it's legally enforceable, and guess what? They'd have to deal in partnership with unions. Well, that's enough is enough. I mean, we are all in this together, and the manufacturers have to have a fair contract price, and they have to in turn commit to you know, minimum wages that are guaranteed, to collectively bargaining for a fair share and safe conditions. So the system has to change, and I'm a great fan of the accord, but I'm very frustrated. It's in one country on one issue. It's terrific. In Bangladesh, safety in the accord factories, you can give it a tick. Something is happening. But the labour laws are still inadequate. They don't meet ILO standards. And this government has been promising change for, what, 4 years now. The minimum wages are about $97, of which they're rarely paid because there's no enforcement. You're more likely to find 67 or 8 as the average. And what do the workers say is a living wage? 120 a month. You know, something's got to change.
There's a lot more to talk about, but we've run out of time. There's a question that perhaps you can take up in the break, that in talking about something needing to change, that at the international level, we're actually looking at an increased push for free trade agreements around the globe as an attempt to save the growth-led model that has stagnated since the financial crisis. Bilateral investment agreements and the transatlantic free trade, trans-Pacific free trade. There's I think, a real question mark to be placed over whether or not that's going in the right direction when it comes to precarious work in global supply chains. I'd like to give the last word to Donfang. I wish I could ask you to actually expand to this friendly audience about social democracy in China, but I will leave it at that. But I would ask you to say something a bit about what you need from us here in Norway, in particular, in the near future.
You know, we have achieved quite dramatically the last 10 years. Since 2005, we decided to push for collective bargaining. And although it's not yet systematic, it's not legislated in China, but from the government and workers, all regarded collective bargaining as the best solution. And whether it is legislated in the future, that is another question. So we decided 3 months ago, we had a retreat, what we will do the next 10 years. So in the next 10 years, will we reclaim the union? The workers reclaim the union. That's the solution. And collective bargaining has to be sustained. It has
The
to be
official
sustained.
union in China.
Yes, and then there's only one union. We don't want another union.
Yeah.
We just want one union in China. And the workers, as long as workers reclaim it, and it is run by the workers, things will be changed. But how to do that? And our next 2 years plan is we will try to get 20 to 50 union election and functioning models in workplaces. That 2 years from now, 2017, July, we're planning to have a big conference in Hong Kong, and those workers' representatives who are elected into the union and self-function union, financially, organizationally, and collective bargaining. And we will gather in Hong Kong. So if, please, from Norway or other countries, ITUs, and if you can join us, but you have to pay your own way. We don't have money to pay you guys. So if you can join us to share with our new trade union leaders how a union function, how a union function under, not only under a social democracy, but how a union produced and guarantees that the social democrats continues this value.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to have a break now of half an hour, and we'll be back in this room at 11 o'clock. Please join me in thanking our guests for this morning. Great, thanks.